the fact that I'm standing here today recording this video with this plane still in one piece is down to pure, unadulterated luck that I emerged unscathed from an emergency situation that was 100% the makings of my own stupidity. And I thought about this long and hard, and that's the word I'm using. I've thought of lots of different words as a result of my own this or that or the other, but stupidity. And I've had near misses, but never an emergency before. I've had near misses before that were due to inexperience and due to poor judgment, perhaps, that was also due to inexperience. But I don't remember a near miss this bad that was so unnecessary, so unavoidable, and therefore so stupid. I should not have let myself get into this position. There's just literally no excuse. I'm not being extra hard on myself. It's now been a little while since this happened. I've had a lot of time to think it over. And I suppose the purpose of this video is to share with other pilots, private pilots, student pilots, whoever, that you are never immune to stupidity. And perhaps as we get older and gradually a bit more experienced, perhaps there are ways in which actually the risks of that stupidity increase. And I'm going to break this down. I'm going to put in all the factors that I think led to this emergency. That there was only one thing I got right about this, which was declaring an emergency. And I did that without delay when the circumstances changed. And that's the only thing I got right about this. The only thing. Everything else I got wrong. And not just once, but twice or three times. And talk about the holes in the Swiss cheese lining up. One more hole in the Swiss cheese and I would have been a C-fit statistic. Almost certainly. And the fact that I'm not is pure fluke. I knew this was going to make me emotional. And the reason I'm so angry with myself about it is because it's not that I risked my own life. I as the years go by, I worry less and less and less about death from my own personal point of view. It's the risk of leaving my family behind. My 3 small children and their mum. For no reward. The risk-reward calculation here was non-existent. I pride myself in, I've never said this before, but I do actually pride myself in my asymmetrical risk-reward assessment skills. By that I mean, I'm pretty good at taking small measured risks only when there's a large worthwhile upside. And let me just put that into context for this video. The risk-reward trade-off here, the only reward of the risk that I consciously chose to take was getting home a bit sooner. Getting home one night sooner. That is the only reward that was on offer from the risk that I chose to take. But the risk I chose to take was I risked my life, I risked leaving my family without a father, and everything else that entails. I risked all of my team at work, I risked their jobs, I risked the future prospects of my life's work and my career and the changes I'm going to make. The risk, the list goes on about the things that I risked. The risk was as big as it gets, literally as big as it gets. I risked everything that I've worked for, my family's future. I risked it all to get home one night earlier. What is it that caused me to make such a colossal, monumental life-threateningly bad decision, an error of judgment? What aspect of human nature was it? What aspect of mentality was it? What aspect of my character was it? Was it hubris? Was it overconfidence? Was it stupidity? Oh, it definitely was. It's the most stupid thing I've ever done in my life. There's no doubt about that. But why? Why? And why did I turn down all the opportunities of avoiding this risk repeatedly? Why did I keep pressing on? Even when I verbalized the question, am I committing get there-itis? No, I don't think so. If I die in an accident while I'm flying, an accident, I accept that risk, and I understand and I know the risks to my family and all those things that I said, right? And the reason that that's an acceptable risk to me is because this is living. To me, flying is living. Pursuing my hobby that has, over the last 15 years, led to some of the most wonderful experiences of my life and meeting some of the most incredible people in my life, including the people I just stayed with in Maine last week, which has led to amazing experiences for my family. I mean, I'm okay with the risks of general aviation. I'm totally okay with them, right? But that's not the same as dying from sheer fucking stupidity. Some of you might, when you see the footage of what happened, and actually I lose video footage, but I've got the audio all the way to the end. So let's go through the factors that led up to this, what could have been a fatal CFIT accident, another statistic. The weather is obviously a major factor, number one. Number two, was I being over-optimistic with my mission for the day? And if you remember, as I said in the last vlog, I had 3 missions that day. But mission number one is to get out of Blackbridge today no matter what happens, because Blackbridge Airport closes on Monday and it's Friday today. Mission number 2 is to get back to Dunkeswell into the hangar before the storm arrives tomorrow. If the weather's looking good enough and there's enough time to get up to Earls Colne for a meeting I want to have today, then that will be the nice to have. I'll talk about the weather in more detail when we get to the actual last few minutes leading up to what happened. The second factor was that actually only a few days earlier the clocks had changed and gone forward 1 hour. And although this was always only a minor factor, it was a factor that affected my assessment of what time it was, but it was the timing was number 2. Number 3 was my own assessment of my capacity, my skills, my ability to fly in marginal weather, especially given the fact that I do have a current IMC or restricted instrument rating. And although I'm legally current, it is another factor, factor number 4. Flying in marginal weather is not the same as flying on instruments. They're completely different. So factor number 4 was, why did I make the conscious choice that if I found myself in marginal weather, I ruled out switching to instruments and flying on instruments as an option. I ruled it out. Actually, I think that was one of my better decisions that day as well. So weather, timing, marginal weather flying skills, instrument rating. An additional factor that only came into play right at the very end, just before the emergency played out, was sudden onset fatigue. And number 6 was a loss of GPS signal on my primary navigation device at the time, which was my Skydemon, which led to a loss, not a loss of spatial awareness, but I lost my bearings. I lost my bearings because of the weather conditions, I was having to circle pretty much constantly at a much lower altitude than I was comfortable with, although it remained legal all the time.
Dunkeswell Operations, good afternoon.
Hi there, I'm a Dunkeswell-based aircraft about to take off from Earls, Colne to return to Dunkeswell this afternoon. Just wanted to check what the conditions are at the moment. I'm pretty sure it's pretty windy up there, but the clouds and stuff, how are they looking?
Yeah, it's not too great here at the moment. 400 above the field, down on the south corner, maybe 200 foot, and then viz underneath 5 to 6k.
Okay. Oh, that's much worse than I thought it was. Okay, and what's the wind doing?
Wind is probably 180, 20 gusting 30.
Okay. Do you know what your forecast is? Is it forecast to get better or worse? Do you know?
I think it's staying static.
Okay. Alrighty. I might have to rethink things then. Okay. Thanks a lot.
No worries.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Try and get as far west as I can and get them to pick me up, because they're currently, as I speak, Amory and the kids are driving down the A303. Why did I choose to ignore that weather report from Dunkeswell? Well, I can remember thinking to myself, it's just a low patch, it's passing through, because the weather reported at Exeter was more than adequate. The ceilings and the visibility at Exeter, which is not far from here, were more than adequate. So I thought to myself, that's just a low patch passing through and it'll probably go. Now, having said that, I did know that the weather was forecast to deteriorate from the west. You can tell from the vlog clips before I departed Earls Colne that I knew there was a significant chance that I would not be able to get into Dunkeswell. I knew that before I took off. I'm still optimistic, although starting to get a bit tight on time. The golden rule is go slow or no go. And that's why I remember saying there are plenty of alternates along the way. The weather for the first half of the route at least is fine. I can stop at Blackbush again if I want to, or Popham, or Compton Abbas, or Henstridge, which is before Compton Abbas in fact. And I remember thinking to myself, Henstridge would have been my most convenient alternate airport, because I have not one but two separate family, parts of my family, relatives, living within a 15-minute drive of Henstridge Airport, either of whom I could have called up and said, look, stranded in Henstridge for the night, can I come and crash with you guys for the night? Would have been no problem. I know Henstridge Airfield well, I've landed there recently, did a vlogger going there with Archie not long ago. It made sense. It was on my route, had family locally, and in my mind it was I'm going to try and get to Dunkeswell, and if I can't, I'll land at Henstridge. And I think there was an element of, look how sensible I'm being about this, creeping in subconsciously. Now that I think about it. Look, I'm being really sensible. I'm not expecting to get to Dunkeswell. Pat on the back. Well done, Charlie. You're not pretending it's going to be fine and just heading off and assuming it's going to be fine. You are acknowledging that there is a real risk of the weather turning against you, being worse than forecast, yada, yada, yada. So plan to go into Henstridge, which you know you can do. Great. Runways into wind. That's going to be fine.
Look at the wind on the surface of that lake down there. That's L3, that's my current alternate. And my next alternate will be Wickham Air Park, whose runway is also mainly into the wind. After that, Popham. See, Thruxton's reporting VFR. View at 2,000 feet, overgot at 3,000 feet. Right next to Boscombe Down, which is reporting something different.
November 1320 Sierra, Thruxton Radio, good afternoon, readability 5 and party message.
November 1320 Sierra, I'm a Cessna 182 on a VFR flight from Earls Colne to Dunkeswell, routing through your overhead and then Boscombe Down. I can't get Boscombe Down the radio. I've just a couple of question marks over the visibility ahead. I wanted to check that you were available for a weather diversion if necessary to November 20 Sierra.
November 2003 Sierra, Roger. A firm we are. We're open until around about 18:15 local.
And I'm 25 miles from Henstridge. May have to go back to Thruxton if I can't get to Henstridge. London information, November 1320 Sierra.
1320 Sierra, London information. Hello again, and pass your details.
I'm continuing en route to Dunkerswell. I'm currently 2 miles south of Beam Henstridge, 1,400 feet QNH 999. It's so far it's okay to keep going. I'm going to keep on seeing if I can get a bit closer to Dunkerswell, or if not, I'll turn back to Henstridge. November 20 Sierra.
I remember reaching Henstridge for the first time and looking down and thinking, I should probably land.
Jesus Christ, that was such a big bang. Bashed my other roof. Got my headset off.
That would be the safest thing to do. I remember thinking to myself, what I'll do is I'll just keep going a bit longer, and if it's not looking good, I'll turn back to Henstridge. I know I can get back to Henstridge. I know I can get into Henstridge. Therefore, it is safe for me to keep going, expecting to turn back to Henstridge. And as I pressed on the direct route, the weather got too low and it looked like it was better to the south. So I thought, that's no problem. I've got loads of fuel. I was full fuel. I had 5 hours or more of endurance. I thought, oh, I'll just go down towards the south coast. And looks brighter down there. And I'll go around that way. Maybe go along the south coast if I need to get under some lowish cloud, because Exeter's still reporting good conditions. I'll get to Exeter on the coast and then go up to Dunkerswell if I need to.
Copy of that, November 20 Sierra. I might just see if I can get down to the coast and track and find slightly better visibility.
But as I pressed on, trying to go south of the weather and then west, I made several turns and the terrain was rising, the clouds were getting lower, and because I'm such a sensible guy and I'm not stupid, I made the decision that that's not going to work. I'm going to turn back towards Henstridge. Maybe it's better to the north now. And I turned back and then went north.
This is super frustrating. But also getting a bit dangerous. Too low now.
Trying to get around this piece of weather that was on my route. And I went north and it worked. And by going north, I was able to get much further west. And in fact, I got all the way to Taunton, which is further west than Dunkerswell, but it's north of Dunkerswell. And I couldn't get down to Dunkerswell because the weather was there. But when I got to Taunton, this is when it all started to go pear-shaped. One of the things that had happened in the flight is that it had been a really turbulent flight. Really bouncy, really bumpy, really windy flight. But that's never bothered me because I learnt to fly. I got my pilot's license in a 2-seat motorised glider with a 60 horsepower engine, which is just about the most wind-prone motorised aircraft you can fly. I think by the time I got to Taunton, I'd been flying for a good hour and a half. There was no problem. I was still feeling good. I was still feeling on top of things. I was very conscious that I was in marginal weather. I was very conscious that I'd now passed Henstridge twice and chosen to keep going and not go back and land.
Don't do that to me now. There's literally a bloody cloud sitting on the deck where Dunkerswell is.
When my GPS signal failed on Sky Demon, the weather conditions were also suddenly, and I hadn't really sunk in, getting worse, and I was lower to the ground and I couldn't continue on track, and so I was having to circle. And because I was circling without my Sky Demon map working, I lost my bearings. And I got on the radio to Exeter, and this is what I said.
Exeter radar, November 1320 Sierra.
November 13200, extra radar, Squawk 0406, and pass your message.
Squawking 0406, November 13200 Sierra is a Cessna 182 on a VFR flight from Earls, Colne to Dunk as well. I'm currently about 10 miles north of Dunk as well. There's a little patch of weather that's keeping me away from it. I was talking to Lamdin Information. I lost contact with them. I think it's a bit too low. I wanted to just have a basic service with you and stick with you while I try and pick my way around this to get into Dunk as well. And if I can't, then weather divert it to you.
November 200, roger, basic service. The extra QNH is 1004.
Basic service and QNH on 004, November 13200 Sierra.
That's all correct. We're just going to make a phone call to Dunkerville and see what the weather's like for you. November 20 Sierra, extra.
November 20 Sierra, go ahead.
Have you just spoken to Dunkerville and their weather? The cloud is on the ground and visibility is 500 metres.
Copy that. And from the weather where you are, is it possible that, I mean, I've got plenty of fuel. I can fly around in circles for ages, but do you think that's something passing through? Or I should divert it to you and wait on the ground for it to pass through?
Okay, the extra weather at the moment is 190.12 knots, 20 kilometres. We have broken cloud at 1,500 feet. The temperature is +13. We're using runway 26 and fully serviceable.
Copy that, November 20 Sierra. I think what I'll do is I will track down to your airport to Exeter if that's okay, with the provisional intention of diverting into you. And if the conditions improve and I can get into Dunkerville before then great. Otherwise, I just might wait on the ground for a minute and see if I can get in later.
Okay, we're open for another couple of hours. There's no problem with time here, but it doesn't sound like the weather's very good at Dunkerville, and I think it is supposed to deteriorate. There is a front coming through.
So my situation had gone from, hey, I'm at Taunton, I'm nearly at Dunkerswell. All I need now is a gap in the weather and I can get into Dunkerswell and land. That had now become obvious that it wasn't the case. So my next alternate would have been Exeter Airport, because at Exeter I could still get home for the night.
Copy that. Okay, so I'm inbound to you then, November 20 Sierra.
Okay, understood. That's copy, thanks. Do you have to take your fuel endurance, please?
Fuel endurance, 3 hours, and I'd actually be great to have vectors if I could, 20 Sierra.
Okay, just confirm you can fly IFR?
Negative on VFR, though I am rated, instrument rated, but I'm going to be remaining VMC.
Okay, understood. And just let me know if you need any help with your navigation.
Right, I've also had a GPS failure on my primary flight device. I've got to back up, but it'd be handy to just have vectors from you if I could.
Okay, have you got the ground in sight?
AFM.
Okay, if you're happy to take vectors with the ground in sight, can you accept that?
Yeah, AFM.
Okay, I'm going to vector you towards the airfield then, and hopefully it'll be roughly down the M5. So fly heading 210 degrees.
Heading 210 degrees, November 20 Sierra.
Just let me know if that heading's going to put you into cloud. I don't want to put you into cloud on my heading, that's all.
And Exeter, as you heard, gave me vectors to fly direct to Exeter Airport. But the direction that they gave me was straight into the soup, and I couldn't do it.
Yeah, it's just my luck. At the moment, that particular heading is just the worst heading for me at the moment. It's fine in the other directions. I've got good visibility and sealing. In the other directions, it's just where I need to get to. Where you are, there's a wall between me and you. I'm going to just see if I can get a bit further west.
Okay, if the weather is better to the east, you can always go back towards the east. I think the weather at Bournemouth is better if you're not desperate to get home tonight.
Yeah, no, I've got a Henstridge is actually also a handy divert for me.
Okay, like I said, the front is coming this way, so it might be advisable if you're struggling with the weather in that area just to go back towards the east and go back to Henstridge.
Copy that. I think that's probably a wise move. I will head back to Henstridge, November 20 Sierra.
Okay, sounds like a good idea.
So I decided, they agreed, best idea, head back to Henstridge. I'd pushed my luck, but I can always go back to Henstridge. But this is where I got suckered by the weather, and I should have known, and they said there was a front. Suddenly, the weather was closing in around me, and on top of the fact that I'd lost my GPS signal, it took me a long time. I switched to my iPhone as backup for Sky Demon, and even though it worked, I suddenly found my mental capacity to process what I was seeing on the screen and translate it into my flying bizarrely, I just couldn't do it. It was like I had task saturation. I was trying to fly the plane in very challenging aviating conditions, circling at a much lower altitude than I was comfortable with, not knowing which direction I was heading. And this was when I suddenly experienced that sensation when this is all too much. I can't do it. I've got to fly the plane, got to work out where I'm going, got to do the radio, got to get... But I'd been being bounced around by that turbulence and that weather, which suddenly got worse for a long time, and I suddenly felt this overwhelming fatigue.
All right, I'll admit it. I wish I'd landed at Henstridge.
This was the only thing that I actually got right on this flight. The only thing that I actually got right on this flight. I realised and recognised that I was overwhelmed, and I realised and recognised that the weather was now a roll of the dice, and that I should land while I could still see the ground. I should land at the nearest available place that I felt I could land safely. And I got on the radio to Exeter, and as you could hear from the response, they couldn't hear me.
Exeter radar.
November.
I knew Merrifield was nearby. I'd seen it many times, and I knew it had three big tarmac runways, and the wind was howling, and all I wanted to do was be on the ground. And I knew that that had easy, wide open approaches from all sides, and it was such a simple decision. I remember not even thinking twice about it. Like, that's it. I'm landing at Merrifield. I have to declare an emergency. Beep, 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 7700. Didn't hesitate. That was the only thing that I got right.
November 20 Sierra, landing runway 21 Merrifield.
And I wonder why I got that bit right and everything else wrong. And honestly, it's because of videos like these. It's only because of videos like these that I've been watching for years and years and years and years. And all the times that people said I should have declared an emergency sooner and I didn't. And that's one of the reasons that I'm making this video. Because I just hope that it helps somebody, anybody watching this, to recognise when you might find yourself in a similar situation and not make the mistake that I made.
Reds, greens, blues.
Let's just be clear, my mistake wasn't taking off. No, I'm still okay with the fact that I took off, because I took off knowing that there was a moderate chance of weather affecting my final destination at Dunk as well, but that I would therefore land at Henstridge or anywhere else if I needed to. I was always ready to divert if needed. My mistake was not realising when I needed to divert and keeping going and pressing on.
Wow. Okay. I am on the ground at Merrifield.
You know, a lot of people say, Charlie, you're really brave and we really commend you for being so honest in your videos about your flying. But I just can't imagine not being. I really can't imagine. I mean, for me to try and find an excuse of how this was somehow not my fault would be the only way I could make my stupidity worse. Charlie, why didn't you just go on to instruments? You know, you could have gone on to instruments. And I did consider it, even after having ruled it out. And actually, this is one other thing I did get right. By consciously ruling it out at the start, when I reconsidered the possibility of going into instruments as things got worse, it was a very quick no. It was a very quick no. And the short answer as to why I wasn't prepared to go on instruments is because, first of all, I hadn't flown on instruments for ages, which leads to one of the takeaways from this video. I mean, I can't even remember. I think it was the last time I revalidated. I haven't been on instruments since then. That was nearly 2 years ago. Secondly, if my autopilot was 100% dependable and reliable, then I might have considered it. But my autopilot works most of the time, but also most of the times I use it, it does something funky. And in IMC, if the autopilot kicked off or did something weird and I didn't expect it, that could easily on its own have caused a controlled flight into terrain. The third thing, I was already so tired I couldn't even continue flying VFR, to the point where I didn't hesitate to declare an emergency. So there was no chance of me going onto instruments. There was no chance. I honestly think if I had tried to fly on instruments and go into IMC, even though I'm currently rated, I honestly think that if I tried to do that, I would have lost spatial orientation and crashed. Not certainly, but the chances of it would have been very high, very high. You know, I can remember as I saw Merrifield come into view, thinking that I don't even care if I damage the aircraft landing it now. I just want to be on the ground. I just want to be on the ground. I don't want to damage the aircraft, but if I do, I don't care as long as I'm okay. I'd already got to that point where I was so far past where I should have stopped and landed, not only because of weather, but also because of fatigue, that I didn't care anymore. I just want to be on the ground. I've also missed out one other factor, which was losing two-way radio contact with Exeter was also another factor that pushed me into that's it, I'm just landing. And that there's no way, the weather had closed in behind me on going back to Henstridge and got worse. I wouldn't have made it back to Henstridge. But what I did find out from the duty flight controller at Merrifield, who's actually based at Yeovilton, is that it would have been a lot less paperwork if I'd been able to get into Yeovilton. It wasn't even an option for me. I was landing at the very nearest place I could land safely. Okay, I'll park it up there.
So I can
I've got to
see it from the...
Thank you, yeah.
When do you think we'll be able to actually take off? Tomorrow?
I hope so. I haven't had a chance to check the weather for tomorrow yet. It's all about... I've only got to get to Dunk as well. I'm really close.
Yeah.
I was so close. The weather was just absolutely... I tried to divert to Exeter and I couldn't, and I had to declare an emergency. This was the only airfield I could find to land at without getting into problems. Merrifield Military Airbase. Suboptimal to say the least. Feeling very stupid. A big lesson learned today about thinking, oh, I can always just turn back to my alternate. Why did I declare an emergency? Because I decided I wanted to land here at Merrifield, and it's a military airfield, and by squawking 7700, it'll be on the record somewhere that's recorded that I declared an emergency, even if just with my squawk. Wasn't happy I was going to make it anywhere else. Spent a delightful hour in this security hut with the chap here at Merrifield. Amory's just about to come pick me up. Sleep well, Dusty. I can't move him until at least Tuesday because they've got to do a risk assessment for my departure from the military. It's Friday night now. They won't do that until Monday, so I probably can't leave until Tuesday. My takeaways from this aren't just the obvious ones. There are several takeaways from this, my first, and God willing, my only emergency. First of all, at that moment when I said, I don't think I'm committing get there rightus, if you even have to ask yourself that question, it's time to land. That is what I would say. That would be my top tip for not killing yourself with stupidity. If you have to consider, am I a victim of or guilty of or committing get-there-itis or press-on-itis, if you find yourself asking yourself that question when you're flying, the answer is yes, land. Land. Takeaway number 2 is a subtle one. I genuinely thought, up until that point, up until that flight, I genuinely thought that I'd done so much watching of accident report videos and near-miss videos, and I survived that videos, and all the podcasts I listened to, I thought I'd done so much of that, that somehow in my mind, because I've done so much of that, I was not vulnerable to making those mistakes. This is the human factors takeaway for me. It was really interesting. Because I've been so conscientious, and because I've been on safety courses, and because I've watched the videos, and because I study all the time about accident reports and podcasts and listen to as many pilot stories as I can get my hands on, I am definitely someone who's consciously thinking about not making those mistakes, and therefore I can't make that mistake. That is a major lesson and a major takeaway for me, right? Something that I didn't realize had crept in. A sense of complacency that I won't make that mistake because I've taken so much care to not be one of those people. Takeaway number 3 is that I need to do practice instrument flight on a regular basis, like once every 3 months, at least once every 6 months. If I had just done a practice instrument flight with a safety pilot or an instructor once every 6 months, I probably would have felt fine going onto instruments, and I could have flown through the clouds and then done an instrument ILS at Exeter. Would have been no problem. In fact, I would have just done an instrument flight from the start. Would have made sense. Got above the weather. And takeaway number 4 is that being comfortable with the risks of aviation as an individual isn't the same as being comfortable with the risks of aviation for the other people in your lives that it would affect if something happened to you. And I will never know, I don't think, what it was that led me to completely miss my asymmetrical risk-reward equation that was completely upside down, topsy-turvy, inside out and back to front. Because had I run that through my head for a split second, get home one night sooner versus all the people whose lives get affected if I kill myself in a stupid plane crash. If I had actually had that thought process, I'd have landed. Why didn't I have that thought process? Why didn't I do my typical risk-reward equation? I honestly don't know. I don't know. That one's a mystery to me. Sorry, kids. Sorry, Anne-Marie. Sorry for risking that for no good reason. Won't do it again, I promise. Thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next one. Bye-bye.